Hello there, everyone. Welcome once again to the One Idea Away podcast. Today I think we've got something in store for you that is a whole lot of fun. We decided to invite back one of our previous guests, relatively recent guest, Matt Hogan, because he has been doing such incredible work journeying and interviewing and talking to people and tapping into different resources all around this idea of fear and what is the impact that fear has on our lives. Interestingly enough, part of what set him out on this course was really starting to take a look at some, relatively small questions like, what's the purpose of my life? And it had him dive much more deeply into this particular path. Now, as I say a little bit at the top of this particular show, because we decided to do this is a little bit more of a conversation. So it's myself, it's Matt, and somebody you're going to hear a little bit more from, Jenny Wiley, who is the community director of the Institute for Professional Excellence and Coaching for iPEC. And we decided to have this as a much broader conversation. As I've been out there and having different chats with students and with coaches and with clients and all sorts of people that are out there, this conversation around passion and purpose and fear, meaning the fear of pursuing these things for ourselves, seems to be one that is really, really prevalent. It also seems to be what is keeping a lot of people stuck from making some of the transitions that maybe they've had in their minds. You're going to see this as a recurring theme. This has been covered in one or two of the most recent past episodes. It's going to be covered again in some of the ones that are upcoming, because there seems to be this intersection that is that we're all approaching that is going to have us make some choices about how we really truly wish to show up in our lives. And what that means is that if we really want to bring ourselves into alignment, if we want to go after the purpose and passion and meaning within our lives and find a way to align our careers, our pursuits, our relationships with that purpose and with that passion, it also means we must face the big fears that we have within our lives. It also means that we've got to take a look at the way we perceive the world, meaning really doing some deeper awareness work and consciousness work as well. So this is another conversation that we dive into, part interview, part conversation, round table, as it were, among the three of us. I hope you'll enjoy this, and you're going to see a little bit more of this format coming forward.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our One Idea Away February live cast. Today, we're talking about fear and finding freedom, overcoming fear, and finding your purpose. And so for those of you who are joining us live on Facebook, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. Or if you're watching the replay, we're still going to be chiming in throughout the Facebook group. So feel free to still add your comments in the Facebook Live. Today, we are joined by Luke Iorio and Matt Hogan. I am Jenny Wiley, Director of Community for iPEC Coaching. Just as a quick aside, iPEC Coaching is the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. We are the sponsors of One Idea Away, which most of you know by now is our space for coaches and non-coaches to engage in high conscious content, listen to podcasts, share resources, be a support for each other. Some of us are participating in our 10-day procrastination detox challenge. So just lots of fun stuff that's happening here to help us transform our lives from the inside out. So today we have our One Idea Away live cast, where we're going to be talking through what this means to find freedom in our lives and overcome fear and really live into the experiences that we want to have be a part of our lives. And so I am joined today by Luke Iorio. You may have seen him in the group, maybe, I don't know. He's the president of iPEC Coaching and the host of the One Idea Way podcast. So what's up, Luke? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jenny. It's fun to be on this side of the mic.
I'm turning the tables on you this time.
Perfect.
And we have our special guest, Matt Hogan. Matt is a certified professional coach. I'll give a quick little intro since not as many people have met Matt yet. But Matt works with individuals who are actively making or looking to make an impact in the world through the causes and the people that they serve. So his lifelong mission that he's embraced is really helping to answer the question, how does fear influence the world we live in? And what can we do about it to transform our lives and the lives of others? So I hope you all see that he's a great guest for us to be exploring this topic of fear and uncovering freedom in our lives. So Matt's world travels has taken him far and wide, leading him to volunteering in Puerto Rico. He has met, befriended, and interviewed people in Ireland, Morocco, Egypt, the Philippines, Sweden, Brazil, and Bosnia, and is currently tuning in live from Greece. So Matt, thank you so much for sharing your evening with us on the One Idea Away livecast.
I'm happy to be here, and even happier that I'm on here with both of you at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little treasure trove of a moment together here. So, well, let's just roll things out by asking just one question. What does freedom mean to you? And I'm going to put Matt on the spot first, since Luke is a regular guest here. Matt, what does freedom mean to you?
You know, I love the question because I think back to when I joined iPEC, and I joined early, so I got early access to some of the workbooks and things like that. And I was doing a values assessment. And at that point, over and over and over, the value of freedom came up time and time again. And it's been very prevalent for the few years since then, or over the past few years. And what's interesting about it, and the answer to this, and I'm going to get there, is that the definition changes. You know, when I wrote down freedom as a value when I was going through iPEC, when I started, before the first live weekends, freedom to me meant at that time that it was freedom of travel, freedom of physically kind of being able to go where I want to go, when I want to go. Not having a manager was a definition of freedom for me. But it's continued to evolve too over time. As I've traveled over the last year, and then now I'm out again, freedom has changed to freedom of choice. And what I mean by that is freedom to choose to go a different path if I want to. So if I decide that I want to change course, change direction, there's freedom in knowing that I can do that. And that could be something as small as saying, you know what, I don't like diet soda anymore. I don't know why I'm using soda, but now I want to drink non-diet soda. So there's choice in that. Or, you know what, I'm actually done traveling for a while. I want to just hang out somewhere for a bit. So there's these varying degrees of choice that come up for me when I think of freedom. But it's also, I think at the end of the day, what I've really discovered is it's more freedom in my mind rather than what I have available to me out here.
Love that. Yeah. And I mean, even with those examples, you know, from one extreme to the other of how you choose what kind of soda you're going to drink, you know, just because habitually I've been drinking diet soda, I know that I have the choice to not do that. Or if I'm habitually, you know, travel is a part of my life and it's a part of who I am, but I'm choosing to travel or not travel, and having that moment of awareness that this is not a default thing that I'm embracing. I have the choice. There is a space there for me is a really beautiful awareness. So thanks, Matt. So Luke, tell us, what does freedom mean to you? And I'm also curious, how has this changed for you over the years?
I think that's, you know, one of the first things there that Matt, you know, you already got into, which I think is an important one, is that our values, number one, our values alone can change over the course of a lifetime. And even if certain values seem to appear like in our top 3 or 5 over and over and over again, it doesn't mean we're going to define them the same way. And that certainly is something that was very, very true for me, because very similar, you know, just a different way of explaining it, but very similar to Matt, what you said. You know, freedom to me was a do what you want, when you want, with whom you want kind of mentality. And there was a certain circumstantial freedom that I was looking for within my life. The freedom of not having a boss, or the freedom of being able to have a very different work schedule. Those were some of the things, or freedom to travel, all sorts of different things that equated to freedom in my mind at that time. I think one of the biggest things that shifted for me was that, and this is maybe 7 or 8 years ago, somewhere around there, was that I started to recognize that as I started to gravitate towards freedom of choice, and I started looking at what was it that was guiding my choices, I became much more aware of what was blocking freedom within. And so, Matt, you already gave the example of having freedom within our minds. And I think it's freedom within our minds, freedom within our hearts, freedoms within kind of our spirit, and even within our bodies, in the sense that there is so much that at times can guide us through misconception and misperception, misinterpretation of the way things are in the world. There are so many things that can be those biases, those tendencies that we have, habits and routines that we have that we've ingrained in just the way that we see the world and act in the world over and over and over again. And so I said, well, actually, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to embrace and see what's actually in front of me at any given time and be really, truly aware of what's here and present in this moment and be free within, meaning to not have those internal limitations and constraints, to be able to embrace that moment and see where it's going to go. Because the more open my lens is, the more options, the more possibilities, the more experience that's there. And I think the part that also changed was not just my definition, but this is something I'd alluded to in an article, and Matt, you had picked up on, was that when I set my mind and kind of set my sights, I should say, on that freedom within, the universe just started slapping me around in every which direction.
All right, you got it.
Like, oh, you want this, huh? Let's just test this now. And just all sorts of different scenarios that would make me feel constrained. And I think this is also that really, really important thing that I learned. I knew this logically. I knew part of this a bit deeper, but I really didn't fully integrate it and experience it until this occurred. Was that the situations that were arising were still circumstantial, meaning they were still external to me, but they were providing a mirror. Mm-hmm. And they were providing that mirror for me to reflect back within myself and say, what is it about the way that I'm engaging in this situation or in life, or the way that I'm perceiving it, or the belief that I'm holding on to, the attachment that I'm clinging to? What is it within me that is adding to the dissonance that is being felt in this experience? And when I started inquiring that way, I started going a lot deeper into myself with really the type of freedom that I was seeking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting. I love you reflecting on how, the universe was like, all right, game on, you're open to freedom. Let's see what this means for you. And I can imagine that a lot of us have had similar experiences where we open ourselves up to what this means for us to be completely open and free and in conscious choice. And yet that can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes. Absolutely. And so enter, what does this all really mean? Like, where am I heading? What is the purpose of this? What direction am I going in? And so, Matt, you've been asking yourself, what is the meaning of purpose in your life? And I'm curious, where does this idea of freedom fit into this concept of my meaning and my purpose?
I think it brings together a few things. So Luke, on kind of piggybacking on your response, and then thinking about the article that you posted in the One Idea Away group that you and I kind of conversed back and forth on that led to this conversation. What I loved about your article was the distinction of commitment, like true commitment. And when I was listening to your response a moment ago about how freedom has changed for you over time, more freedom within rather than without, it made me think about that line or that focus in your article about that true commitment. Yeah. And then, like you said, the universe kind of just said, oh, okay, you're all in. I'm going to show you. Are you sure? And you're like, yeah, I'm in. And to answer your question, there's a level of commitment that may be unspoken, that maybe we may not wake up every day and just go, I'm committed. There's this way of being that regardless of what I'm experiencing, whatever I say I believe, whatever thoughts come to mind, I don't necessarily have to believe them. I don't necessarily have to pursue them. I don't necessarily have to live in this distorted perception of what is or what should be. And as I say that and I explored, I know one of the things I mentioned in that thread was, for me this year is really about exploring the nature of thought. Mm-hmm. I realized a lot of what prevented me from feeling free in my life, that kept me shackled often, whether even though I might have blamed it on a job or a relationship or anything like that, it was really my thoughts and perceptions and judgments of those experiences, which was all rooted in, again, thought. So freedom to me is being able to step back and be that objective observer of those experiences, and then going back to choosing where I go from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jenny, let me add to that.
Go for it.
I think there's, when we start to peel back those different, different aspects of our mind, the different concepts in our mind that may create that type of limitation, and that we want to get to know ourselves better. I think, it's part of, to me, when we ask about what is the purpose of our lives, there is also a little bit of that bigger question that's inherent in there, which is, before we ask about our lives, what is the purpose of life? And obviously that's I'd love to be able to figure that out in the next, 37 minutes.
We'll have a series of live casts.
It might take a little longer, right? It might be a little bit longer conversation. But when, one of the aspects that I have found to be true, at least for me, and I believe there's some universality in it, is that there's an aspect of life that to me feels like it's remembering our way home. And by that, I mean remembering our way back to the very, very core of who we are at that level of awareness, that level of consciousness, so that we can know ourselves at that truest, purest way and interact with life fully from that place within ourselves. And why I say it's remembering our way back there is because we've learned and been conditioned with all of these different lessons and wiring and habits and beliefs through the course of our lives. And so much of, Matt, what you're describing is the way in which we begin to peel back the things that have taken us away from that place of home inside of ourselves. And so, for me, I believe that is part of what's in there about that, maybe that purpose, that secret of life. But I know certainly for myself, it's part of where I find purpose and find meaning, is how do I reconnect to that part of myself and live from that place? Because I find that, number one, that's what leads to just extraordinary joy and extraordinary wonderful things and abundance that's happened inside of my life. But I also know that that's what I want to pass to other people, meaning to my wife and to my children and to all my loved ones and to my clients and to our students and beyond and beyond and beyond and beyond. Because I know the more that we live from that place, there's a lot of things that I think will start to fade away. There's that recognition of shared humanity. There's that recognition of us meeting each other from where we truly are, as opposed to constantly arguing and conflicting based off of surface reality that really isn't all that much reality. So a few thoughts.
I'd love to explore that. We're talking about concepts that, obviously are resonating here. And I hope that everyone who's watching, that it's resonating with them too. But I would love to ground this a little bit. And, one of the things that, like with the procrastination detox challenge, one of our intents for the One Idea Away group is to provide a platform for us to see what is it that we have been delaying because potentially of fear, and then to dig into that and to uncover and to really go deeper there. And so if either of you or both of you would be willing to share an example of something that, maybe was there as a filter before that you had more awareness around, and that, started some kind of ripple effect, I'd love to share that with everyone.
I'd love to add something to what Luke said.
Great.
You talk about and it was in an effort to ground this a bit, because we're talking about concepts of like finding your way home,
right,
and fear and all that. And a lot of what I've personally learned and seen is it's really difficult to put into words what that means, finding your way home. It's something you have to feel and experience, just like fear.
Yeah.
right.
You can sit here and tell me, Jenny, you'd be like, I'm afraid that you drink too much Diet Coke. And that's, again, I'm going, Coke.
We are not a sponsor of Coca-Cola, everyone.
But you can tell me that, but I don't feel that. It's a concept. Right. So there's this level of direct experience that has to be felt and sensed for someone to truly get it. And, Luke, when you and I did the podcast not long ago, that was one of the reasons I started traveling. And you said in your words, you probably read a few books about it, but there's an experiential element to it. I want to feel it. I want to actually be able to say in my body, not just my mind, that I can experience this, sit with it. And even if I can't describe it to someone else, there's this level of, you get it.
Yeah.
And, to ground that, going back to the topic of purpose, and it can be a challenging topic because it's a big concept.
Right.
And your purpose could change. Right now my focus is on this mission with fear and the people that I'm working with and coaching and things like that. But maybe in 5 years, and my purpose may change to being a father. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's choice and freedom in that, though, and I think it's valuable for us not to get too overly attached to what things should be or have to be. And sometimes there's this level of testing versus trusting too. Yeah. And what I mean by that is, if there's just a sense that you want to do something, test it. You don't have to live there forever. And Luke, you and I talked about during the podcast too, is you don't have to quit your job, sell all your stuff, and start traveling like I did. I have a tendency to make big leaps.
Jump in the deep end.
But, take one small step. Instead of saying, how do I become X overnight? Ask yourself the question, what can I do to be 5% closer to that, or 5% better at this skill, or improve 5%? It's incremental, it's less scary, and it allows us to start developing foundations that we can only truly get through direct experience.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And I'd be curious, Matt, with some of your perspective on this, and kind of Jenny, you just started to bring this up as well, because you talk about direct experience, and I love the way that you re-explained that, because it's so often fear is kind of one of the big blocks to us actually having that direct experience. Because so often, and I think this is something that we've forgotten along the way, is that fear was something that was meant to exist inside of us biologically to keep us safe. Mm-hmm. If there was a saber-toothed tiger or a bus barreling down on us and, on Madison Avenue, we want fear kicking in. We want that burst of energy to get out of the way. And yet we've now applied that sense of fear and anxiety along with it to all sorts of emotional and social and mental constructs that keep us from actually having the direct experience. And part of what you're describing and using that 5% is, how is it that we can begin to live our way into those experiences, to try them out a little bit, to see that, oh, wait a minute, I put my toe in the water and it was okay. I put my foot in the water, it was okay. So that we're moving closer and closer and closer to that direct experience. Jenny, I think you were asking about, kind of what's an example of some of that fear and how that relates to freedom and what we've overcome.
Sure.
I will say for me, probably one of the biggest was the fear around vulnerability, because I always was this individual who had it all together, calm, cool, and collected was kind of the image that I portrayed. And I was, pretty much anything but I put on a really good veneer. And so it looked really, really good. And, over time, through thankfully just some wonderful people in my life, from everything from friends and family to mentors, started to help me crack that veneer, so that I would find ways of being more honest, meaning more authentic to the experience I was having, which is vulnerability, and sharing that with them in little settings, and being honest about, well, I really struggled with this, or I'm really nervous about that, or, I'm panicked. I don't know what to do here. Those are things you would never hear me say out loud, and mm-hmm. certainly never say publicly to people. And then what's amazing to me is that, and at some point, that those 5% add up to just this huge exponential breakthrough. And I know that, because I remember one of them was, talk about being vulnerable, getting choked up and teary-eyed on stage in front of 200 of your students. Pretty vulnerable moment, pretty raw.
Imagine.
And it was like, oh, I just went there. And you know what? I was fine. Everything was good. Actually, it was better than anything I ever could have imagined. But had it not been the 5%, like what Matt, you're describing, that probably would not have been possible. And it was me living into the experience of being able to trust myself in such a way, and trust that inner strength in such a way that I could say, well, here goes. And if it doesn't go well, that's okay. I know I'm still going to be fine. And most of the time when we actually have the experience, we realize we're fine there too. Mm-hmm.
If I may add on to that, Luke, just one, I appreciate you sharing about the vulnerability in front of 200 students, because on the receiving end of iPEC's phenomenal coach training program, and in the context of what we're talking about here, I think about all the 5% that you had to make or step through creating the community and the company that we see now as iPEC and the many graduates around the world. And so there's a lot of 5% there that most of us may not see, but that you directly experienced. And I could even say that about Jenny too, making her way from building her coaching practice to saying, you know what, I really love working with the team and I love working with community. So you know what, this direct experience brought me to this place that I love so much. Yeah. But you would have never guessed probably when you first started out that you're going to be where you are today.
There's no straight line. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for reflecting that, Matt. It feels nice. Luke, I love where you were going with that. And because I know some of the things that are going on with you right now, I'd love for you to share how you've been taking kind of a different approach on diving into that. Like, what does that 5% building upon that mean? And, creating more of living through the experiences. So I'd love for you to elaborate for everyone about that.
Oh, there's a lot there. Let's see which part of that are we going to frame here? A couple of things. Number one is I will shamelessly put in a plug. Pay attention for the next live cast as well, because it's going to speak to even further elaboration on some of this. One of the things that was very different for me was a really, really difficult, painful word. It's patience. Really difficult word. Okay. And so one of the things that I needed to learn how to do for myself was, how is it that I could be patient within the experience I was having, be more present to the experience that I was having? Because in that, there was so much that was being revealed at that time that I previously had not been aware of, because I would disconnect from those moments or I'd rush through those moments. And so for me, there was a lot of different things. Number one was I spent a meditation's been something very important to me for a while, but I kind of doubled and tripled down on that over the course of the last maybe 5 or 6 years and got very, very deep into a mindfulness practice and deep into a meditation practice. That enabled me to be much more present in the experiences of what I was having and pay much more attention to the emotions and even physical sensations that were coming up as part of it, not just the constant stream of thoughts that was going on. And when I did that over the course of about a year, specifically, it was kind of like a year-long project that focused on, that created just tremendous change and shift and opening for me. And so one of the things I'm working on, it's part of what we'll be chatting about in the next live cast, is that I'm actually designing effectively a program, a curriculum for myself for a year. And very specifically, it is around the focus of how is it that I can allow myself to fully love and be loved. And so I'm in the midst of putting together the types of practices, some of the types of ongoing learning in a very, very dedicated way, because that's going to help me propel myself. It's kind of one of the ways to really create that commitment and that focus for a prolonged period of time. But the reason, or part of the reason why loves very specifically became the focus of that, was I actually found that the very thing that was predominantly keeping me from being fully present and patient in a given moment was compassion. I did not have compassion for myself, and I did not have compassion for other people around me. It was always, well, we should know this by now. We should get on to the next thing. You should have figured this out by now. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. There's no time for that.
Check the box.
Yeah, exactly,
right.
And as soon as I started to embrace compassion, which I did through mindfulness work, I did through some studies, some coaching, and I got much more centered in that idea of compassion and actually experienced what compassion is, both on the receiving as well as the giving end, amazing things opened up. Mm-hmm. And that's what has kind of, over the course of years, led to just a very intentional process I'm laying out for myself this coming year.
Yeah, beautiful. Matt, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
What I love about that, first off, it made me think of a couple of things. One, the book, The Fearless Heart, and it's written based on what you said, that actually to create more of what we want in this life and to experience more of what we want, it's about the importance and compassion, self-compassion. And we sometimes it's interesting to see a lot of dialogue that goes back and forth on the topic of love. You say everything is love, and someone's like, well, what about this war? What about this? What about that? And those are real things. Like, war is a real challenge. There's a lot of things that we can see as a reflection of fear rather than love.
Yep.
Because often we say the opposite of love is hate, but actually beneath hate is fear. So the opposite of love is fear. And the first thing that comes to mind is I can't wait to see over the next year how you transform as you create and go through that curriculum. I have a feeling the next time when we're having a conversation a year from now, you'll be a very different person and more amazing than you probably know you already are. And, actually, I'm kind of on a similar path, Luke. I actually started 2 days ago a online compassion retreat. It's a 30-day online compassion retreat by a coach named Alex Mill, who spent 14 years in a monastery. And it's all like this morning's exercise specifically rings true. The question was, what's the voice saying? Talking about the voice in our head, and then just listed everything out. And you could sit there and look at it and then recorded it and then listen back to yourself. And you just sit there and look at it, and no wonder things feel frustrating at times. It's no wonder that life feels hard at some times. Look at these things I'm saying to myself all day. So that was what came up for you when you were sharing about this venture you're on, which is a very, very, in my opinion, beautiful place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
What you just brought up is certainly part of part of this path, part of this journey for me, but I know for so many others as well. And I just don't want anybody to lose the kind of the reference or the underlying point that was there, which is that so much of that love and compassion begins with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And because we are so unforgiving of ourselves. And we are, from the inner critic to just that constant chatter of what we believe we should be doing, should be acknowledging, should be remembering, all of these pressures that we put on ourselves. And as soon as we begin to create a little bit of space, a little bit of acceptance for who we are, and give ourselves a little bit of that self-love and that compassion, the amount that begins to transform in our relationships, in the way that we show up to life, in the things that change in the way we communicate, decisions we make, has this unbelievable cascade effect. But it's, so much of it, and I know people have probably heard it through the years, but so much of this journey, it has to begin with you at home, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really inspiring to hear both of you reflect on this. And, what's coming up for me is just that remembering of, that love is connection, and that's connection to all parts of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that fear or, disconnection is really just something that's trying to separate ourselves from what the actual truth is, and being able to trust ourselves. And so I'd love for you to reflect on that level of trust and kind of ownership in your experience, because no one's going to swoop in and do this work for you.
Well, actually, let me just twist that separately. And then Matt and Jenny, I'm curious to your reaction to saying it this way. I'm not so sure I would say that fear is moving us away from ourselves or from that love or whatnot within. I actually think that part of the intent or the impact or the maybe even purpose of fear is it's an awareness mechanism. And that fear actually can be an extraordinary gift and blessing to us, to get us to pay attention to something that feels discordant within us or within our environment, within our connection to what's occurring. And that to me actually is a very, very vital thing. And it is a blessing, even if it doesn't feel like it. I'm curious for the both of you, what your thoughts are on that.
You want to go, Jenny? You want me to?
Yeah, I mean, when I experience fear, there's a space of separation there for me. There's a disconnect of love for myself, and so when I'm aware of that, absolutely, I see that as not every time, like, oh, look at this opportunity for me to be able to reconnect with myself, but eventually I get there, and it's only through connecting to that fear and saying, hi, I see you,
Yes.
I hear you, there you are, that it allows me to create that deeper experience of connection with myself. So yeah, that resonates with me.
What I love about that is it's not, what you just shared is not about seeing fear and then facing it head on and fighting your way through.
Right. Come here, fear, I got you.
Yeah, I think we often get in this dualistic conversation of like, you're either running from it or you're fighting it.
Mhm.
And both, in my opinion and experience, are not beneficial to our experience of life, the joy, the happiness we want to feel. And a thought that came up for me from today, specifically to kind of ground some of this, was we were talking about psychological fear versus like biological fear, which is like, if you have a saber-toothed tiger. Well, I was walking today to go work out, and I looked both ways before I crossed this intersection, but didn't see it. And then I almost got hit by a car. I was like this far from getting hit, but I didn't even see it. I just jumped back before I even actually saw the car.
Yeah.
But then where that can transition from like a biological safety mechanism, if you will, to psychological is if I would have continued after that, who does that guy think he is? Do you see what he just almost did to me? And I could have ruined my entire day by talking about how that guy was a jerk and all these things, but really below that is a fear of I was going to get hurt.
Mhm.
Another example that came up for me is fear can be really confusing. Is we talked about this in the podcast, Luke, and it was when I was in Mod 2, and for those not in iPEC, there's 3 live weekends that you attend. I was talking to Kyle, my trainer at the time, and I was saying, how do I quit my job? How do I quit my job? How do I quit my job? And he came back he goes, I think you're asking the wrong question because you know how to quit your job. But the thing was, while I see a lot of people say, you're living the dream, Matt, you're traveling, you're doing all this. In that moment, when I was asking those questions, I was not free.
Yeah.
It was, to be a little crude, damned if I do, damned if I don't.
Mhm.
I was afraid that I was wasting my life, so I was fighting that. I was afraid that if I gave my job, I was somehow failing, or if I left my job, I was somehow failing. Like it was like I was immersed in fear, whether I looked here or there. And what was really missing was that patience, that compassion, that being able to say, I don't have to get this right because there is no right. And so when I look back at that moment, while it was a key moment from a standpoint of going the route I have over the past year and a half, I can look back on it and see in that moment, I was not free either. I was not being compassionate, but I'm grateful for it because the fear that had me wake up, going back to your point about being a compass, the fear had me wake up that the way I was living my life, regardless of where I was working, the way I was living my life was from a place of high expectations, of judgments, of self-criticism, and a feeling of I just never do enough. I never do it right. I'm always doing it wrong. And people are thinking all these things about me. It was just a constant barrage of self-defeating thoughts.
Mhm.
And oftentimes you're not even aware of them. I know I wasn't.
Yeah. You bring up just a critical point because, and I think it's why differentiating between that idea of freedom of circumstance versus freedom within is so important, is that there are times where we want to make a decision because we want to move away from something that feels constraining or not in alignment or otherwise. And are we making that decision because we clearly see what we're moving ourselves into and how that next thing is truly in alignment because we've spent the time to really truly understand the fit that is there for us? Or is it just simply that we want to get away from whatever's over here in this so-called current circumstance? And a lot of people do that. It's it's John Kabat-Zinn with the famous phrase of wherever you go, there you are. Right. So if you still had the fear and you just bringing it to a new situation, it's still going to be there. Whereas if we do apply that patience, that compassion, that awareness, that consciousness to understand what's really going on for me before I make the change, and let me get settled in and accepting of what's occurring for me, what's unfolding within me, what is it that I'm really longing for? What is it that really doesn't resonate for me about this situation? What is it about my perception that maybe it's the way that I'm perceiving this that may be wrong? Maybe there's nothing wrong with the environment that I'm in right now. Because I know just as many people who've discovered that have discovered a new path. And so it is being very intentional and very conscious and patient with that inner, that self-inquiry, so that we can understand that and not make a decision out of fear. Because even though we think we may be moving towards freedom, we still may not have made that decision from being a place of free within. We may have still just made it out of fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm hearing kind of an underlying nuance here of, when we're coming to a place of choice about our experience, that we have the highest intention for ourselves too, and that intention is coming from a place of love and connection to ourselves, as opposed to if we're just trying to move away from something. Is there an intention there? Might be unconscious, I don't want to experience pain, or what I perceive as pain, but are we consciously choosing that? And so I think that that's an important distinction for everyone to remember. Are we creating a loving intention for ourselves? Are we making this choice out of the highest intention for ourselves?
Definitely.
Something, Luke, when we had our conversation in the Facebook group that led to this, the book you talked about, What's in the Way is the Way, which I told you has become a favorite of mine since you mentioned that. And one of the things that stood out to me the most is one of our greatest fears is the fear of fear.
Yeah.
And often it seems scarier to us to turn towards and have that conversation with fear within ourselves, like Jenny so greatly described, versus, giving up the alcohol, giving up the addiction to social media, letting go of all these different things that deep down we know, like, I really should stop checking my phone 65 times a day. And I say that because I'm guilty of being that person.
Yeah, my phone even tells me that I'm doing that.
But it's often, like the book said, scarier to sit with and just admit, this scares me. It scares me to look at this and to talk to myself about this. And that goes back to the element of direct experience again.
Yeah. It's amazing because when you are able to say, I am scared about this or within this situation, or whatever the statement happens to be, at least for me, and this probably was not true the first time it happened, but it became very true with each successive time. The amount of space that feels like it opens up within you to just be able to sit and settle into the experience that you're having, because you're saying to yourself, I don't need to run from this. I can be with this. I'm strong enough. And even if I have no idea how this is going to work out, even though I am still scared by whatever this is, or confused or uncertain, or whatever word is that you want to drop in there, I know that I can just sit here and be with this for this time being and see what comes of it. Because I know constantly worrying about it and ruminating on it is not doing any good anyway. So I might as well get to know this differently. And the more that we practice that, this space begins to open up inside of us. And then all of a sudden, all of these extra perspectives can come in. All these different insights can come in. And we start to view different vantage points that help us better understand what might be going on for ourselves first. And then, okay, what, if anything, do I actually need to do about this? Because that's also the other thing, is sometimes you don't need to do anything about it. Maybe sometimes it's just the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're coming to the end of our time together, and I would love to circle this back to anyone who's listening to this live or recording. And if you had one or a couple of questions that you would ask yourself kind of towards the beginning of your journey that might be helpful for someone who is in their journey, what types of questions would you be asking yourself or invite someone to ask themselves to more deeply connect to freedom or purpose, or where even they should start with this?
You can start, Matt.
What am I not allowing myself to see is a question that I love.
Yeah.
And if we have time, I'd like to ground that into something.
Please.
So we started the conversation about all my travels and stuff like that. And I even mentioned about not being not getting overly attached about how things should be or how they should look. And I say that because I came back to the States for 3 months and spent a lot of time with my family in Florida and my family in Missouri. And I'm writing an article about it. I experienced a closeness with my family that I've never had in my entire life. And I was excited to continue my travels because I'm focusing on creating this international practice and things that I'm up to. And as I got here in Greece, and I've been here about a week, there was something just bothering me. And I was asking myself, what is it that I'm not allowing myself to see? And really what came up for me, and I'm glad I have a really good coach because she helped me coach around this, was I really wanted to go back to Florida and spend a couple months with my mom, because it's a relationship that has been important to me for so many years, but we weren't in a place to have that relationship, and now we are. And so all these things came up about, well, if I'm there, then I'm not learning about these cultures, I'm not doing all these things, and somehow that means my business is going to fail, and all these various catastrophizing thoughts. And again, I was very grateful for my coach, and we've talked about the importance of having someone you can talk to about these things that knows you. And I realized that deep down, what was more important to me than anything was that relationship. So I'm coming back at the end of March, and I'm going to go to Florida and actually spend a couple months with my mom to focus on our relationship. And guess what I learned? I can still do a lot of the things I'm doing now. I just won't be traveling during those couple months.
Right. That's awesome.
So that question is really powerful for me personally.
Yeah, that I will say that's always been one of my favorite, because we do, it's just funny. We already know so much of what we need to know. It's really just kind of beginning to turn and bring that into our awareness a little more fully and embrace it more fully. And when we do that, we begin to separate exactly, Matt, I think you just gave a wonderful example of grounding that, in the sense of being able to separate what really truly matters for us, what really truly feels like it's in alignment and resonant for us, versus what we think we should be doing, what is expected of us, what is it that the fear-based mind would have us do or convince us of. And we start to feel that separation. And so I guess maybe two things I would add in terms of being on the beginning of the journey. I think that's a wonderful question to begin with. I would also just add almost this practice of asking yourself, what am I feeling now? Because the more practiced we get with this, the more that you're going to realize that when there is a moment that feels deeply resonant to you, which means that it's something that's really aligned and it's tied to your joy and to your bliss and to your purpose and your passions in some way. You're also going to know and be very sensitive to when there is discord or dissonance inside of you. And that leads to different inquiry. And it leads to a different inquiry to understand, well, maybe what is it that I'm not seeing right now? What is it that might be contributing to this? What is it that feels like it might be out of alignment for me, or out of alignment with my values, or where I feel like I want to go with my life or my experiences right now? And so I think that's another part, a very important part of the inquiry. And I think just then the last thing I would add is to think about, what is the quality that, for me, I described it as compassion was that first really critical quality that opened up so many different things for me. And so what is that quality for you that starts to create a bit of that domino effect, so that if you were to allow that quality through in your life, if you were to focus on letting it emerge as opposed to having it come to you, what would that quality be, and how would it start to change things for you? And I think that's one of those other areas where you can set your commitment, your conviction on, is how is it that I can cultivate that quality? How is it that I can let that quality emerge in my self-talk, in my decisions, in my relationships, in my conversations, and allow it to come out of you just more readily? And the more that you do that, again, you're just going to feel this different trajectory start to take off, and it's probably going to feel a lot more natural, and it's going to feel a lot more resonant to who you really truly are, which to me is, again, for me anyway, that's a big part of what this journey is all about.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you both so much for your insights as we're all, walking together on this journey, becoming experts in our own experiences. I think that this is incredibly helpful and insightful information. So thank you for exploring and sharing the space with me today on this live cast. So we'll just start to wrap up. Both Luke and Matt mentioned the podcast that they did. So if you're interested in listening to that, that's on the One Idea Away podcast. And so you can find that on oneideaaway.com/podcasts. And we have our One Idea Away community where you can continue the conversation. It's on Facebook. Just search for One Idea Away and you'll find our group there. This live cast today is sponsored by iPEC Coaching. So if you want to learn more about iPEC and how the coach training program can help you find and uncover more of those amazing questions for you to become an expert in your experience in life, just visit ipeccoaching.com. That's IPEC coaching.com/OIA, and you can learn more. And if you'd like to learn more about Matt and his work, he's got a website, matthoganworldwide.com. You can check it out, and we'll be sure to link to that in our Facebook group and in the show notes. So thanks again, guys, for sharing the space today. Deep gratitude for both of you, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you, Jenny.
Bye-bye.
Check out iPEC's coach training program at ipeccoaching.com/OIA. And of course, to find out about all the conversations, events, gatherings, all the things that we've got upcoming, then head on over to oneideaaway.com/community. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, please do us the favor of subscribing, reviewing the show, as well as sharing insights or comments that stood out for you in this episode.